Close your eyes and imagine a vast valley, surrounded by mountains, with a shimmering lake at its center. Rising from the waters of that lake is a city unlike any other, its causeways stretching across the water, its temples climbing toward the sky, its streets alive with merchants, priests, and warriors. This is the capital of the Aztec Empire, one of the greatest cities the world had ever seen. The Aztecs, or Mexica, came to dominate central Mexico in the 14th and 15th centuries. Their empire stretched across valleys and mountains, binding together dozens of peoples through trade, tribute, and war. To outsiders, they were both admired and feared for their dazzling architecture, their bustling markets, their gods demanding devotion, and their relentless warriors. Tonight, we will walk through their world. We will step into the crowded streets of sail upon its canals, breathe in the scents of its markets. We will hear the songs of priests in towering temples, feel the rhythm of drums in the plaza, and glimpse the daily lives of those who built, fought, and dreamed beneath the Mexican sun. Let the modern world fade. Breathe deeply and imagine the waters of Lake Texcoco glimmering in the light of dawn. Picture a city floating upon the lake, alive with voices, colors, and the steady beat of life. Welcome to the world of the Aztecs. Though the city shone with temples and palaces, most people who lived there were not nobles or warriors, but commoners. Their lives were filled with labor, duty, and little rest, bound to the needs of the empire and the demands of survival. Imagine waking before sunrise in a simple home made of mud bricks, its walls thin, its roof low. The floor is packed earth, the bed a mat of woven reeds. Smoke drifts from a small fire, its faint glow pushing back the darkness. A woman grinds maize on a stone slab, her hands moving rhythmically, the sound of stone upon stone filling the room. The smell of ground corn rises, soon to become tortillas, the staple of every meal. The day begins in the fields. Men walk along narrow causeways to reach plots of farmland, the famous Chinampo's floating gardens, built upon the lake. They push canoes through the water, their reflections shimmering beneath them, tools balanced across their shoulders. The Chinampas are rich with maize, beans, squash, and chilies, the lifeblood of the city. Tending them is back-breaking work, planting, weeding, hauling water, guiding canoes heavy with crops back to the markets. Women carry the weight of the household. They grind maize endlessly, weave cotton into cloth, fetch water from canals, and raise children with discipline and care. Their lives are steady, their labor unending, the rhythm of the empire sustained by their hands. Children are raised not with indulgence, but with expectation. From a young age, boys help in fields or learn trades, while girls weave, cook, and carry. The Aztecs believed that every person, from the humblest child to the highest noble, had a duty to the gods and to the empire. Laziness was despised, labor was virtue, and even the smallest hands had work to do. Life was noisy and crowded. The streets bustled with neighbors, with merchants carrying goods, with priests chanting prayers. Yet, for commoners, there was little rest. Tribute had to be paid to the empire maize cloth, cacao, or labor for great building projects. Taxes weighed heavily, and failure to meet them meant punishment. Now picture the end of the day. The sun sets behind the mountains, casting golden light upon the lake. A family sits together on reed mats, eating tortillas with beans and chilies. Outside, the sounds of the city fade into the steady rhythm of drums echoing from the temples, where priests chant to the gods above. Inside the home, children drift to sleep as their parents whisper prayers, preparing for another day of labor. The city may have been magnificent, but for the commoner, life was a constant struggle, balance of work, duty, and survival. Their hands built, their labor sustained its markets and temples. Yet their lives were often humble, their voices quiet beneath the grandeur of empire. Among the many rulers of the Aztec Empire, one name stands apart: Montezuma II, remembered both for his power and for the fate he met when the Spanish arrived. His story is one of grandeur and tragedy, of devotion to the gods and the heavy burdens of kingship. Imagine, at the dawn of his reign, around the year 1502, the city is vast, home to perhaps 200,000 people, its temples rising like mountains of stone, its markets filled with the hum of voices, canals weave through neighborhoods, causeways stretch across the lake, and at the center stands the Templo Mayor, the Great Pyramid, where priests perform rituals to honor the gods. This is the city Montezuma inherits, rich, powerful, yet restless under the constant demands of war and tribute. Montezuma was not only a ruler but a priest before his ascension. Tall and solemn, he carried himself with dignity and caution. His upbringing in the noble class had prepared him to read omens, to conduct ceremonies, to speak with measured grace. When he became Tlatelolco, the great speaker, he was seen as the voice of the gods themselves, chosen to lead both in war and in worship. His rule was marked by strictness. Montezuma raised the authority of nobles and priests, demanding obedience and reverence from his people. He was known for his grandeur, rarely allowing commoners to look him directly in the eye. Messengers approached him barefoot, heads bowed, their words spoken humbly. Yet to his followers, this formality was not arrogance, but a reflection of his sacred role. He was the axis between gods and men. War remained the heartbeat of the empire. Under Montezuma, armies marched to expand Aztec influence, bringing new lands into tribute. Warriors carried obsidian-edged weapons, their shields painted with bright designs, their armor of cotton padded yet strong. Victories brought not only wealth but captives whose presence in rituals reinforced the empire's devotion to the gods. But Montezuma's reign was also shadowed by unease. Strange omens were said to appear: comets blazing in the sky, temples struck by lightning, eerie cries echoing at night. Priests and soothsayers whispered that the gods were restless, that change was coming. Montezuma listened carefully, his heart heavy with the weight of prophecy. In his palace, life was splendid. Imagine wide courtyards filled with flowers, pools where rare birds swam, walls painted with bright colors. Servants carried platters of cacao, eggs, and fruit. Musicians played drums and flutes. Dancers performed in dazzling costumes of feathers and gold. Yet beyond the palace walls, commoners continued their endless labor, their lives far humbler than the grandeur of their ruler. When the Spanish first arrived in 1519, led by Montezuma's rule faced its greatest test, he heard reports of pale-skinned strangers arriving on ships with sails like great white birds, carrying weapons of iron and beasts, unknown horses. Unsure if these newcomers were men, gods, or something between, Montezuma hesitated. His devotion to omens, his careful nature, made him cautious at a time when boldness might have saved him. History remembers his reign not only for its splendor, but for its end. Within a few short years of contact, the empire would collapse, its temples shattered, its ruler captured. And yet, Montezuma remains a figure of fascination, a man caught between two worlds, the old and the new, his story echoing as both triumph and tragedy. Now picture Montezuma standing upon the steps of the Templo Mayor, the city spread out before him. The lake glimmers in the sun, the mountains rise in the distance, the markets roar with life. He raises his eyes to the heavens, seeking guidance, his heart heavy with duty. In that moment, he is both powerful and fragile, a ruler at the height of empire and on the edge of downfall. One of the most remarkable achievements of the Aztecs was not a temple or a palace, but a garden, vast fields of green that seemed to float upon the waters of Lake Texcoco. These were the Chinampas, often called the floating gardens, though they were not truly floating at all. Instead, they were carefully constructed islands built by human hands, turning lake into farmland. Imagine the scene at dawn. Mist rises gently from the water, the surface still as glass. Canoes glide quietly through the canals, their paddles dipping with soft splashes. Ahead lie rows upon rows of gardens, long rectangles of dark, fertile earth, edged with willow trees whose roots sink deep to hold the soil in place. Birds wheel above, their cries echoing faintly in the morning air. This is Xochimilco, the green heart of Aztec agriculture. The construction of a chinampa was an act of patience and skill. Farmers drove stakes into the shallow lake, weaving reeds between them to form a frame. Into this they piled mud, soil, and decayed vegetation, layer upon layer, until an island rose above the water. Over time, the soil grew rich with nutrients, replenished by the lake itself, capable of producing harvests year after year. On these gardens, Aztec farmers grew maize, beans, squash, chilies, and tomatoes, foods that not only sustained their empire, but would one day transform diets across the world. The chinampas could be harvested several times a year, their fertility unmatched by dry land. They were, in many ways, an ancient form of sustainable farming, a delicate balance of water, earth, and labor. Picture a farmer at work. He bends low, planting maize in neat rows, his hands dark with mud. Beside him grows beans that climb the stalks, and squash spreading low to cover the soil. In the distance, another canoe carries baskets of vegetables toward the markets of. The air is filled with the scent of earth and water, the hum of insects, the gentle rustle of willow leaves. The chinampas were not only practical, they were beautiful. Flowers of every color bloomed in some, tended not for food, but for ceremony, their petals carried to temples as offerings. Gardens of marigolds, dahlias, and roses spread across the water, turning Xochimilco into a tapestry of green and gold, red and violet. Even today, the canals of Xochimilco still exist, a reminder of this ancient ingenuity. Visitors can drift along in boats, painted with bright colors, passing islands where farmers still grow vegetables as their ancestors once did. It is one of the last living echoes of the Aztec world, a fragment of history that has survived the centuries. Now picture the floating gardens at twilight. The sun sinks low, painting the water in shades of orange and purple. Canoes return slowly, their baskets empty, their paddlers weary but calm. The gardens rest in silence, their rows dark against the shimmering water, their willows swaying gently in the evening breeze. The chinampas were more than farmland, they were the foundation of greatness. They fed an empire, sustained a city of hundreds of thousands, and stood as proof of the Aztecs' mastery of both nature and imagination. In their quiet beauty, they remind us that even the mightiest civilizations are built first on the steady rhythm of daily sustenance. Like many great civilizations, the Aztec world was carefully ordered. Everyone, from the humblest farmer to the most powerful noble, had a place within a hierarchy that gave shape to society. To walk the streets of was to move through layers of rank and duty, each person tied to the empire by their role. At the top were the nobles, the Pippleton. Imagine them dressed in cotton robes, dyed with bright colors, their cloaks embroidered with feathers and trimmed with jade. Their homes were large, built of stone, with courtyards filled with flowers and fountains. Nobles held land, commanded tribute, and filled the highest offices of government. They were the administrators, the judges, the governors of the empire. To be noble was to live in privilege, but also in expectation, to serve the state and to maintain the grandeur of its rule. Beside them, in importance, were the priests, guardians of the god's will. Their temples towered above the city, their rituals shaping the rhythm of life. Imagine a priest standing high upon the steps of the Templo Mayor, the morning sun glinting off white stone, his voice rising in chants that echoed across the plaza. Priests observed the heavens, tracked the movement of stars and planets, and kept the sacred calendar that determined when crops were planted, when wars were fought, when festivals were held. They were both astronomers and theologians, keepers of knowledge and interpreters of divine signs. Then came the warriors, the beating heart of the empire. To the Aztecs, war was not only for conquest, but for tribute and honor. Warriors earned status through courage in battle, rising from commoner to noble if they proved themselves. Elite orders, such as the Eagle Warriors and Jaguar Warriors, wore elaborate costumes of feathers and animal skins, their presence both fearsome and dazzling. Imagine them in formation, their shields painted with suns and stars, drums pounding as they marched. To be a warrior was to live in constant pursuit of valor, for only through bravery could one ascend in life and in the afterlife. Below these ranks were the commoners, the McKaywalton. They were the farmers, the craftsmen, the traders, the laborers who built and sustained the empire. Their clothes were simple plain tunics of woven fiber, sandals of leather. Their homes were modest, their meals humble. Yet their work fed the markets, their hands built the temples, their skill kept the city alive. Though their lives were filled with labor, they carried dignity in their contribution. For without them, the empire could not endure. At the edges of society were others artisans, whose craft brought beauty, merchants whose journeys brought wealth, and those who lived as servants or in bondage, their lives tied to the will of others. Each role, high or low, was part of a greater design, a balance between order and duty. Now picture the city square at midday. Nobles in embroidered cloaks pass by, their heads held high. Priests move in procession, their chants drifting above the crowd. Warriors stride with shields on their backs, proud and fierce. And all around them, commoners, bustle farmers selling maize, women grinding tortillas, children running between stalls, each person different in station, yet bound together by the rhythm of the empire. The Aztec social order was strict, but it was also dynamic. Valor in war or brilliance in craft could lift a man higher, while failure or dishonor could bring him down. In this way, the empire was not only a ladder, but a test. Each step measured by duty, devotion, and strength. If the temples were the soul, of then its markets were the heartbeat. The largest of all was the great marketplace of Tlatelolco, a place so vast and lively that Spanish chroniclers later compared it to the greatest cities of Europe. Here, thousands gathered each day to buy, sell, and exchange, filling the air with a constant murmur of voices and the scent of food, flowers, and spice. Imagine stepping into the square. The sun shines overhead, reflecting off white stone. Beneath it, a sea of stalls stretches as far as the eye can, rows upon rows of goods carefully laid out upon mats, tables, and baskets. The hum of conversation rises, punctuated by the calls of merchants advertising their wares. Around you are tens of thousands of people, their cloaks bright with color, their arms heavy with goods. Every corner of the empire is represented. From the far north come obsidian blades, sharp as glass, black as night. From the south, tropical birds, their feathers dazzling in red, blue, and yellow. Merchants display cacao beans, used not only for drink, but as currency itself. Gold and jade gleam in the sunlight, offered in exchange for cotton cloth, pottery, or fine woven mats. The market is carefully ordered. Officials walk among the stalls, ensuring fairness, punishing cheating, keeping peace. Goods are grouped by type here, the farmers with maize, beans, and chilies. They're the hunters with game and fish. Beyond them, artisans selling jewelry, knives, sandals, and baskets. Even healers are present, offering herbs and remedies, their stalls fragrant with sage, mint, and flowers. Food fills the air with rich scents. Vendors stir pots of maize porridge, roast chilies on flat stones, and grind cacao into a bitter, frothy drink. Imagine the taste of warm tortillas, soft and fresh from the griddle, eaten with beans and a touch of spice. Children tug at their mother's sleeves, eager for sweets made of honey and amaranth. The market is not only a place of trade, but of gathering. News spreads here as quickly as goods. Messengers bring word from distant provinces. Musicians play flutes and drums. Dancers move through the crowds in brilliant costumes. The marketplace is alive with voices and rhythm, a world within the world of the city. For the Aztecs, trade was more than commerce, it was connection. Merchants, the Pachteca, were respected, for they carried not only goods but knowledge. They traveled far beyond the empire's borders, bringing back stories of distant lands, new ideas, and alliances. To the people of the marketplace was proof of their empire's greatness, its abundance laid out in plain view. Now picture the square at dusk, the crowds thin, the stalls close. Merchants pack away their goods, baskets lifted onto shoulders, canoes waiting at the canals to carry them home. The air grows quieter, the stone plaza warm beneath the fading light. Yet the market never truly sleeps. Tomorrow and the day after, the square will fill again, the hum of voices returning, the rhythm of trade resuming. The great marketplace of Tlatelolco was more than a center of economy. It was a symbol of life itself, busy, vibrant, ordered, and alive. In its endless flow of goods and people, the Aztecs found both sustenance and pride, proof of a city that thrived in the heart of a lake. For the Aztecs, the world was not only fields, markets, and palaces. It was a universe alive with God's beings of sun and rain, of night and earth, of creation and destruction. To live in the Aztec Empire was to live in constant relationship with these powers, honoring them through ritual, prayer, and devotion. Imagine the skyline at its center rises the Templo Mayor, the great temple, a massive pyramid of stone climbing upward in two broad stairways. One stair leads to the shrine of Huitzilopochtli, god of the sun and war. The other leads to the shrine of Tlaloc, god of rain and fertility. Each day, priests ascend the steps, their cloaks trailing, their voices chanting prayers that echo across the city. Drums beat steadily, like the pulse of the world itself. Huitzilopochtli was the patron god of the Mexica, the one who led their ancestors to the Valley of Mexico. He was the sun, the warrior, the one who demanded strength and courage. The Aztecs believed that each sunrise was a battle, the sun fighting to rise again. To help him, they offered devotion rituals meant to give strength to the sun in its daily struggle. Tlaloc, by contrast, ruled the rains. His presence was seen in every drop of water, every harvest, every storm. Farmers prayed to him for fertile fields, for gentle showers instead of floods, for mercy instead of drought. His temple was painted in blues and greens, adorned with symbols of water and life. Beyond them stood many more gods. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was the god of wind, learning, and creation, a gentle figure in many stories, associated with wisdom and renewal. His temples were adorned with serpent motifs, feathers bright as the dawn. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, was a god of night, fate, and conflict, feared and respected. His obsidian mirror, said to reflect the truth of all things. Totec, the flayed lord, symbolized renewal through sacrifice, tied to the cycles of agriculture and rebirth. And countless others filled the Aztec pantheon, each tied to the forces of nature, each honored with festivals and offerings. The Aztecs marked their year with a sacred calendar filled with ceremonies. Every few weeks, new rituals unfolded, festivals of music, dancing, flowers, incense, and offerings. Imagine the plaza before the Templo Mayor, alive with color. Dancers in feathered costumes move in rhythm. Conch shells sound. Incense of copal drifts upward in fragrant clouds. Children watch with wide eyes. Merchants sell food to the crowd. Priests chant in solemn tones. The entire city becomes a stage of devotion. To the Aztecs, these rituals were not optional. They were essential. The balance of the cosmos depended on them. The sun rose, the rains fell, the earth bore fruit, all because the gods were honored. Life itself was seen as a constant cycle of giving and receiving, of humans offering devotions so that the gods would grant life in return. Now picture the city at night after a festival. The fires burn low. The plaza lies quiet. Feathers and flowers scattered across the stone. The drums are silent, the priests withdrawn to their chambers. Yet, in the stillness, the people believe the gods have heard, that the cycle of life will continue another day. The Aztec religion was vast, demanding, and filled with awe. It wove the people into the fabric of the universe. Each prayer, each offering, each song a thread connecting human life to the divine. For the Aztecs to live was to serve the gods, and to serve the gods was to keep the world itself alive. In the Aztec world, family was the root of society, and education was the thread that tied every person, rich or poor, into the fabric of the empire. Unlike many civilizations, the Aztecs believed that every child deserved schooling. Boys and girls, nobles and commoners alike, were taught from a young age not only how to work, but how to live with discipline, respect, and devotion. Imagine a small Aztec home at dawn. The walls are made of adobe, the roof of reeds, the floor a smooth patch of earth. A mother wakes early, grinding maize on a stone slab, her hands moving with steady rhythm. The smell of tortillas fills the room. A father prepares for work in the fields or for duty in the marketplace, his cloak simple, his steps firm. Children stir from their reed mats, their hair still tangled from sleep. Before they eat, they are reminded of their responsibilities: obedience, humility, and service to both family and gods. At the age of 15, boys and girls attended schools. There were two types: the Comicac, reserved mainly for nobles, trained future priests, judges, and leaders. Here, students memorized sacred hymns, learned astronomy, and practiced rituals. Discipline was strict. Boys rose before dawn to sweep temple courtyards, to carry water, to fast and pray. Their lives were guided by piety and study, preparing them to uphold the empire's traditions. The other school, the Telpachakali, was for commoners. Here, boys trained in warfare and labor. They learned to carry heavy loads, to march long distances, to handle weapons of obsidian and wood. Teachers urged them to be strong, brave, and loyal to their community. Girls, meanwhile, learned skills for weaving, cooking, and managing households, though some also trained in religious rituals or healing practices. Women in the Aztec world carried heavy responsibilities. They managed the home, prepared food, wove cotton into beautiful cloth, and raised children with care. Marriage was seen as a sacred duty, arranged by families and marked by ceremonies filled with songs and offerings. A married woman became the keeper of the household, her belt adorned with keys symbolizing her authority. Motherhood was honored, but also dangerous. Childbirth was seen as a kind of battle, and women who died giving birth were remembered with the same reverence as warriors fallen in combat. To raise strong children was to serve the gods and the empire, ensuring that future generations would continue the cycle of life. Yet women's roles extended beyond the home. Some became midwives, healers, and market vendors. Others took part in religious ceremonies, carrying incense or singing hymns. A few rose to positions of power within priesthoods, advising nobles and interpreting omens. Though society was led by men, women's labor and wisdom shaped the rhythm of daily life. Now, picture an Aztec family in the evening. The father returns from the fields, his canoe heavy with vegetables from the chinampas. The mother sets fresh tortillas on a mat, the fire casting flickering light on the walls. Children sit quietly, listening to stories of the gods, their eyes wide as their parents teach them lessons of respect, courage, and devotion. Outside, the city hums with distant drums, while above, the stars wheel silently across the night sky. For the Aztecs, education was not only in schools, but in homes, temples, and markets. Family was the first teacher, society the second, and the gods the constant guide. In this way, every child, every mother, every father was woven into the empire's great tapestry, each thread strong, each thread necessary. For the Aztecs, war was not only a duty, it was the very heartbeat of their empire. Through war, they expanded their influence, gathered tribute from conquered lands, and, most importantly, honored their gods. To be a warrior was one of the highest callings a man could pursue, and among all warriors, none were more admired than the eagle warriors. Imagine an Aztec warrior preparing for battle at dawn. He kneels upon a reed mat, offering incense to the gods, his voice low in prayer. Beside him lies his macuahuitl, a wooden club edged with sharp blades of obsidian that gleam darkly in the morning light. His shield is painted with bright designs of suns and feathers. Across his body, he wears a suit of cotton armor, padded and hardened, light enough to move, yet strong enough to protect. The Eagle Warrior was no ordinary fighter. He belonged to an elite order, one that demanded both bravery and success. To capture enemies alive in battle, later in sacred rituals, was considered greater honor than to kill. Only through courage and skill could a man rise to this rank, gaining not only prestige, but privileges, fine clothing, feasts at the palace, and the right to dine with nobles. Picture them assembled in formation, their helmets carved and painted to resemble the heads of eagles, feathers cascading down their backs. When they moved, it was as if a flock of mighty birds took flight across the battlefield, the sun glinting on obsidian and gold. Alongside them marched the jaguar warriors, clad in spotted skins, fierce and silent. Together, they embodied the strength of the Aztec state. War itself was ritualized. Drums beat steadily as armies advanced, shells sounded, and banners rippled in the wind. The air filled with cries and chants, the clash of obsidian on wood, the shouts of warriors striving for victory. Yet even here, in the midst of conflict, there was structure. Capturing enemies was valued more than slaying them, for captives were destined for temples, offerings to keep the sun rising, the rains falling, the world alive. Beyond the glory, the life of a warrior was harsh. Training began in youth, with endless drills, long marches carrying heavy loads, lessons in courage and discipline. Injuries were common, survival uncertain, but for those who succeeded, honor was eternal. In Aztec belief, fallen warriors did not fade into silence. They rose with the sun, their spirits flying as birds and butterflies, joining the eternal cycle of light. Now picture the battlefield at dusk, after the drums have fallen silent. The warriors return to the city, their banners lowered, their steps slow with fatigue. Families wait at the gates, mothers and children pressing close to greet them. In the great plaza, fires are lit, chants begin, and the victories of the day are told in song. For the Eagle Warriors, each battle was not just survival, but service to empire, to gods, to the endless rhythm of life and death. The Eagle Warriors remain one of the most vivid symbols of Aztec culture, courageous, disciplined, and devoted, their legacy, echoing still in feathers, in stone carvings, in the stories that tell of men who fought not only for land, but for the sun itself. In the year 1519, a shadow fell across the Aztec world. From the eastern shores of Mexico came strangers, unlike any the people had seen before. Spaniards, led by Sevelles, with sails like great white birds, appeared on the horizon, carrying men clad in shining metal, riding beasts, unknown horses. To the Aztecs, these newcomers seemed almost otherworldly, perhaps even divine. Imagine the first rumors reaching. Messengers arrive breathless, speaking of pale-skinned men with thunderous weapons that spat smoke and fire. They describe animals tall and fast, unlike anything in the valley. They bring tales of great ships larger than houses to Montezuma and his priests. These reports are troubling, fitting too closely with omens of change foretold in the years before. At first, Montezuma hesitates. He sends gifts of gold, jade, and cotton, hoping to appease or understand these strangers. But court Urs does not turn back. Slowly, step by step, the Spanish march inland, forming alliances with tribes who resent Aztec dominance. Alongside them travel interpreters and priests, turning each meeting into both negotiation and threat. When it last reaches, Montezuma makes a choice that will shape history. Rather than meet the strangers with war, he welcomes them into the city. Imagine that moment, the Spanish crossing the causeways, their armor gleaming, their horses stamping nervously on stone. The Aztec people watch in silence as their emperor greets these foreigners within the heart of his city. For months, tension simmers. The Spaniards marvel at its canals, its markets, its temples, more splendid than many European cities. Yet they also covet its wealth, its gold, its abundance. Misunderstandings grow. Small sparks of violence break out. Trust crumbles. Soon, Montezuma is taken captive within his own palace, a prisoner in the city he once ruled with majesty. Then comes the breaking point. In 1520, during a festival honoring the gods, Spanish soldiers block the exits of the temple and strike at the gathered crowd. Panic erupts. Blood fills the plaza, and the people rise in fury. The Spanish are forced to flee, their retreat through the causeways marked by chaos and loss. This night becomes known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. Yet the Spanish do not give up. They return with allies and reinforcements, laying siege to the great city. For months suffers. The causeways are cut, the canals blockaded, food grows scarce, and disease spreads. Smallpox, brought by the invaders, sweeps through the population with deadly speed. Imagine the city during the siege. Once vibrant markets lie empty, temples stand silent, the streets echo with hunger and grief. Families huddle in homes of mud and stone, listening to the distant clash of weapons, the cries of warriors, the pounding of drums, fading day by day. The lake itself, once a mirror of life, now reflects only smoke and fire. In August 1521, after weeks of fighting, the last defenses fall. The Spaniards march through the shattered streets, their banners raised, their cannons still smoking. Once one of the greatest cities of the world lies in ruins, its temples broken, its palaces collapsed. Montezuma is gone, the empire shattered. In its place, the Spanish raise a new order, one that will reshape the land for centuries to come. Now picture the lake at dusk after the city's fall. The water is still, the mountains quiet. Smoke drifts from the ruins, the sounds of the city hushed. Where once there was music, prayer, and laughter, there is silence. Yet beneath that silence, the memory of endures, a city of canals and gardens, a people who built beauty upon water, a civilization whose light still lingers in history. Though the Aztec Empire fell in 1521, its memory and influence never truly disappeared. In the ruins of beneath the stones of what would become Mexico City, the spirit of the Aztecs still lingers, woven into language, food, art, and tradition. Imagine the canals of Xochimilco still drifting with boats hundreds of years later, their flowers blooming just as they once did in the time of Chinampas. Farmers continue to tend small floating plots, using the same methods their ancestors perfected. The land remembers, even when cities rise and empires fall. The foods of the Aztecs spread across the world. Maize, beans, squash, chilies, cacao, and tomatoes, once humble crops of the Chinampazar, now staples far beyond Mexico, shaping diets across continents. Every time you taste chocolate, every time a tortilla warms your hand, you touch a fragment of Aztec heritage. Their stories, too, endure. The gods of the Aztecs Huitzilopochtli, Tlaloc, Quetzalcoatl still whisper through legends. Their temples uncovered by archaeologists, their symbols carved into stone. Even the Spanish, who sought to erase the old religion, could not fully silence it. Today, festivals and rituals in Mexico still carry echoes of Aztec devotion, blending ancient beliefs with newer faiths. The Nahuatl language, once spoken across the empire, remains alive. Words like chocolate, tomato, and coyote traveled into English and many other tongues, a quiet reminder of the Aztec world woven into everyday speech. And in the ruins of the Templo Mayor, unearthed in the heart of modern Mexico City, one can still walk among stones that once saw the footsteps of Montezuma, the chants of priests, the beating drums of festivals. History does not vanish, changes form, like smoke rising, like water flowing. The legacy of the Aztecs is both tragic and beautiful. Their empire ended in fire and conquest, yet their achievements, agriculture, architecture, art, and culture, remain alive, carried not only in ruins, but in living traditions. They remind us that civilizations may fall, but their echoes endure, carried forward in the rhythm of human memory. And so, our journey through the Aztec Empire comes to an end. We have walked the crowded streets, have watched farmers tend floating gardens, listened to priests chant in towering temples, and seen warriors march with eagle feathers gleaming in the sun. We have stood in marketplaces filled with color and sound, and we have witnessed the fall of a city that once shone like a jewel upon a lake. The Aztecs remind us that history is not only stone and ruin, but life families gathering around fires, children learning in schools, merchants bargaining in squares. Their world was full of beauty and hardship, of devotion and discipline, of triumph and tragedy. As you rest now, let those images drift softly through your mind. Picture the calm waters of Lake Texcoco at twilight, the sun sinking behind the mountains, the city's lights flickering like stars upon the lake. Hear the faint echo of flutes and drums fading into silence. The Aztecs are gone, but their spirit remains in the food we eat, in the words we speak, in the ruins that still rise against the Mexican sky. Tonight, their story has carried you not into battle or conquest, but gently into peace, guiding you toward the quiet harbor of sleep.